welcome to HMSC's Lunch and Learn session today. We have a special guest today, Dr. Felicia Olmeta Schult, who is the Oregon Sea Grant Extension Coastal Hazard Specialist. And Dr. Olmeta Schult will be talking about the coastal hazards research, outreach, and engagement in Oregon Sea Grant OSU extension perspective. So thank you for joining us. Enjoy your lunch, and we'll save questions for after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chung. Thank you, everyone, joining us, here in person at Hatfield and also online via Zoom. That's great. And I will start first with a quick little poll, because I'm curious always to know how people are familiar with the coast. And what you can do is like take a little photo, you have a QR code, or just go to slido.com and enter this code. It's called Lunch and Learn. Yeah. And the question I'm asking there, and sadly, yeah, I'm not logged in. They had some technical issues. But the question I'm asking there is basically, for how long have you been living on the Oregon coast? So it's on now. It's just, sorry, I had to click. Trying to do multitasking, and it's new. I like to use those little tools, but one is like a few weeks. My question is like, for example, if you have summer scholars coming from out of state, less than a year, one, it still doesn't work.
Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no, someone said anonymous. Oh, are you asking a question? We just type in the
You should just, it's like a multiple choice. So you just be able.
It's an open-ended.
Huh. Okay. It didn't want to work. I don't know why. I know. It's like the things you want to try. But anyways, what you can do, you can type in the chat and I look after. Or you can just tell me in a room, like on average, like for how long have you been in the coast? No, it works.
Oh, yeah, it's just a delay.
No, technology. It's okay. It's like a little warm up because I have to have another little poll. But yeah. Because for example, me, I just moved here like 3 months ago. So it's a little different when, you live on the coast and when you're like visiting them.
Me too.
Nice. And the thing is that me now, I cannot see my results, which is fantastic. So I will ask a volunteer. Oh, yeah. Oh, you can have, yeah, thank you. So we have 31% more than 10 years, 23% a few weeks, 15% less than a year, 15% 5 to 10 years. Some of you live 1 to 2 hours away from the coast. Oh, and some more than 2 hours away from the coast. Great. So it just was to know how people were familiar. And like I was mentioning, me, basically, I just moved here like 3 months ago, and I really enjoy living on the coast. Also used to live in Vancouver, Washington. So I had to commute, 1 hour and a half to the coast. So being in this position has been really like interesting to see the differences, to work on coastal hazards from far away, to actually live there and see things a little differently. But it's like now through my job, I travel up and down the coast, and I really enjoy exploring new areas for my work, but also during my free time. And however, the coast, is beautiful, especially if you've been here only during the summertime, might look a little different from like winter times, because what happened during the winter storms, when they are coupled with king tides, which has the highest high tides, and sea level rise, all that can have serious effects on the shape of our coastline and built infrastructure. And that is a photo that was taken in 2021 in January in Lincoln County. And so I'm Felicia Olmeta Schult. I use pronouns she, her. I'm the coastal hazard specialist with Oregon Sea Grant and OSU Extension. And I'm based not at Hatfield, but my office is with OSU Lincoln County Extension on the Bayfront in Newport. And before I tell more about coastal hazards today, I'm going to share a little about my background and why I ended up in this position, because it was not a linear path. So I was born and raised on a Mediterranean island, French Mediterranean island called Corsica. The population is only 340,000 people, which is about roughly half the population of Portland. So we can fit all of us in half of Portland. And the red star represents my small village called Rutari. And the yellow star is basically where I was spending all my summers in the little village when I went for middle school called Saint-Florent. So I got lucky that, I got to go to the coast. It was only half an hour away. So it's how I fell in love with the coast and the ocean. But what I didn't do my studies in Corsica. After high school, I went to the south of France for 2 years, and where I studied oceanography. And then there was a partnership between the school and universities in the US. So what I did, I went to Hawaii Pacific University, so another island. My parents were not too happy about that because it was really far. But I went to Honolulu for like 2 years where I did my bachelor in oceanography. Then I was really interested in the human dimensions of environmental issues. So I went to University of Rhode Island to do a master in marine affairs. And then after doing different kind of jobs, like big lab tech, research assistant on a National Estuarine Research Reserve in Rhode Island, and other things, I ended up doing my PhD at Washington State University in environmental and natural resource sciences. And so for my thesis, what I did, nothing related to coastal hazards, but my thesis was titled The International Mediterranean Sea Cetacean Sanctuary Prospects for an Effective Sanctuary Agreement. So you can see on this map, this sanctuary, Corsica is actually in the middle. That's why I did that at first, because I was like, maybe I want to go back to France at some point. And so I examined the governance and international cooperation arrangements used to implement this sanctuary, because it's stuck in the high seas. In the Mediterranean, high seas are after 3 nautical miles. And so I interviewed government officials, nonprofit staffs in France, Italy, and Monaco to understand how the 3 countries cooperated for this agreement, and also what institutions were created regionally and locally so they could protect their common regional heritage. And we have about 27 cetaceans, marine mammals in this area, and they go feed there during hope wedding every summer. And a lot of maritime shipping traffic and fisheries in this area as well. Then what I did for my dissertation research, again, not about coastal hazards, but when I went, is like a north coast of California. And what I did over there is I examined the California Marine Protected Areas planning process to understand the pros and cons of such a large-scale collaborative project. And here on this map, it's only the north coast. Because what I did, I specifically researched how this process has been organized, discussed, accepted, and implemented locally on the north coast of California. So I conducted focus groups, interviews with state agency staff, nonprofits, tribal staff, fishermen, scientists, and recreational users. And doing this kind of work, which was my field work because of health issues, I couldn't do the field work like you go scuba diving and all that stuff. I couldn't do that because of health issues that happened to me. Going on the field and talking with people was my field work. And I really enjoy doing more of this applied research and also community engagement. So I applied for Sea Grant fellowships. So because I went to Washington State University, I applied for the Washington Sea Grant Hirschman Fellow, which was a 1-year position, and I was placed with the Washington Department of Ecology. And over there, I was the co-author for a report that was basically interviewing different state agency staff to get lessons learned about how could they integrate sea level rise and climate change language into their capital grant programs. So projects, when you have evaluation criteria for those programs, projects will take that into consideration. And looking definitely at the successes, challenges, and needs. Out of 60 capital state grant programs, only 5 programs were using this actual language. I don't know where it's at right now, but because people were worried about pushback from project sponsors. And what I did also, I helped restructuring and developing the Washington Coastal Hazards Resilience Network website. The website, was an effort that started a little while ago, and it was a little old. So I helped to make it more accessible to Washingtonians, to have more like policy funding, scientific resources, and educational materials on coastal hazards for Washington. So it's thanks to this fellowship that I actually started working on coastal hazards. And then after the COVID year, where it was a little muddy and was not sure what I would do, actually I ended up doing a little podcast on the side, but I applied for the Oregon Sea Grant Resilience Fellowship, and I did that, for a year and a half. And I'll explain some of the projects I've been working on, and that led me to my position today, where I started my position as assistant professor of practice in coastal hazards, and for both Oregon Sea Grant and OS3 extension. So it's been a year. Yay. And so basically, as you can see, having a little glimpse of my background, that my studies and lived experience prepare me to work at the intersection of science, society, and policy. And today, my role as coastal hazard specialist is to work with community partners to increase their resilience of their coastal communities to the impacts of climate change and natural hazards, such as, you have more like chronic hazards, such as coastal erosion, flooding, and more acute ones, such as, the tsunami. So another little poll. And so this one is like, you have two questions. And let me start it because I realized on my phone, I have to start the poll. The first, how would you rate your level of knowledge of coastal hazards? So are you an expert? You are very knowledgeable of some coastal hazards. You have limited knowledge of some coastal hazards. You don't know much at all. And actually can see the results. Yay. So let's see. It's going up. Okay, 9 people did it. Thank you. Oh, 13 now. Yes. So, wow, we have 54%. I'm very knowledgeable of some coastal hazards. And the next one, I have limited knowledge of some coastal hazards. So that brings us to the next question. Rank coastal hazards based on your knowledge of them. So I'm curious which ones you are the most familiar with. So we have erosion, flooding, landslide, tsunami, and I never heard of coastal hazards before. Nine answers in. So far, tsunami is number 1, followed by erosion, which is good for Hatfield. It's a good sign. I'm happy to see that. Erosion and flooding and landslide, which actually landslide is not too surprising that we see that at the bottom, because what we talk the most about are like, top 3. Oh, actually erosion is number 1 now.
People are listening to your responses.
I know, they like switch things around. Okay, great, thank you. So now what I'm going to do for people who are like not familiar, oops, let's move to the next one. Here we go. So I'm going to explain briefly some of the coastal hazards because some of you may not, be well familiar. But let's start with sea level rise. So, and I'm not going to go into like a long explanation of what it is. But basically, ice is melting from land into the ocean. We have warming waters that expand, also slowing Gulf Stream and seeking land, that all that contributes to sea level rise. It's a global phenomenon, but the amount and speed of sea level rise varies by location, even between the East and West Coast. And while the sinking land only affects some areas and at varying rates, ice melt and thermal expansion, so the warming of water, are considered global causes everywhere. So basically what it means in a nutshell, it's like a global phenomenon, but the sea level rise rate is going to be different depending where you live. And we're going to see even in Oregon coast is not the same for the whole coast. So what happened here on the coast? So we have tectonic uplift. So we have some of the plates basically, and I explain that more about when we talk about earthquake and tsunami. But having a tectonic uplift means that the relative sea level rise rates are slower in Oregon than in many other coastal regions in the US. And for example, in some areas of the Oregon coast, the tectonic uplift are kept pace with increases in sea level rise. For example, whereas relative sea level rise in southern Oregon, so Coos Bay in south, and northern Oregon, Cannon Beach and north, is either falling slightly or stable. But where we are right now, the sea level rise rate in Central Oregon has been 1 to 3 millimeters, so or 0.04 to 0.12 inches per year since at least 1970s. So where we are, and on average, globally, it's about 3.4 millimeters. Therefore, the sea level rise differ along the coast. So especially it's like higher here on the central coast. And so not one number can be really applied for the Oregon coast. And here's pretty urgent in some areas when you have many coastal estuaries that basically protect inland communities and help support the state economies. Here we have the Yaquina Bay estuary, and after you have a couple of them, all along the coast. So having sea level rise there is, having important, impacts. And so what this map is representing is just launching, I think, earlier this year, like the Oregon Coastal Management Program, OCMP, that is part of DLCD, so the Department of Land Conservation and Development. I developed tools basically to assist local communities in planning for the impact of sea level rise. And they use this Oregon Sea Level Rise Impact Explorer. And here you can see I've been showing a map, like it's like just a print screen from the Explorer. And we can see, we're like around here, and you can see the effect of sea level rise. And the colors change based on how many coastal hazards it's going to have. For example, storm surge, erosion. So you can see here when it's like really, darker pink, it means you're going to have coastal erosion, storm surge, and all that is like all compounding over there, on the coast. And so that is helping basically to see how, to highlight areas that would be affected by sea level rise related hazards, such as storm wave, flooding, and erosion in the next 30 to 50 years. And a lot of you mentioned also flooding for hazards, so like happen in low-lying lands, flooded by seawater when the volume of water in a waterway exceeds basically its capacity, the waterway's capacity. And that is a photo of the city of Nehalem. If you go there every year for the king tides, it's flooded. It's like if you want to really see something, but it's like, I've even seen people with like canoeing in the streets over there one day. So, and coastal flooding can be exacerbated by increased river flow, storm surge waves, and the king tides, high king tides, and sea level rise. And of course, again, it's going to be different depending where you are. It's going to depend on the topography, which means like the specific shapes and features of the land surface. It's going to affect how coastal flooding occurs and its intensity. So if it's like a really flat area, like the city of Nehalem, yes, it's going to be highly flooded. If you have more like, the landscape is a little different, more hilly, it's going to be different. But floods can be local and impact, neighborhood communities or the whole river basin, depending also if it's combined with like high tides with like heavy rains. So you have to consider also compounding effects as well. And landslide, that also is something that you maybe noticed here when you drive past Beverly Beach. This photo was taken there. So if you're like north of Newport. So landslides are basically a common chronic problems in Oregon, especially when you have heavy precipitation. But that can happen also when you have earthquakes. And basically it's the downslope movement of rocks, soil, related debris, and they're all composed of different materials. And what happened too, they can happen suddenly or move really slowly over days, months, or years. And some of you probably also heard maybe of the landslide that happened on the South Coast that completely like blocked 101 for a little while. And I'm probably still working on that. So And another example was here in Lincoln City. Yeah, I think it was, Lincoln County, I think it was, Gleneden Beach. And here you can see it was like someone's porch that basically ended up, fell off the cliff. But the major cause of landslides and earthquakes are continuous rains that saturate the soils. That's one of the main issues, and also knowing that it's like pretty dynamic here. And also the landslide can be the direct consequences of human activity. For example, improper drainage is most often the factor when a landslide occurs as well. And another one is erosion. So it's like the loss of coastal land when materials are picked up and move away from the coast by water, wind, and so forth. That's another photo at Gleneden Beach. If you go to Gleneden Beach, you can see a lot of different features, what is happening there. But usually beaches and sand dunes are the first line of defense against harsh ocean conditions. And here's like a photo of like dune grass, beach restoration project, because what they do, they help dissipate the energy of ocean waves. So, and kind of protect any features behind those dunes. But they except if you have a lot of beach grass, otherwise dunes are known to naturally moving a lot, and to be shifted by winds, waves, and currents. It's really dynamic too. And some of the main causes of coastal erosions, are storms, high energy waves, flooding, sea level rise, and different human also activities, different kind of shoreline development. For example, if you remove the vegetation, if there is, for recreation, if it's like a lot of working on like sensitive dunes areas, for example, sometimes shoreline armoring can cause as well increased erosion because it's going to protect from erosion effects in some areas, but increase it in others. So they can be a little, problematic. Those are like, for example, ripraps. Maybe you've seen on the beach before, those big boulders, those big rocks, or bulkheads or seawalls. Those are like wood or concrete metal walls. And basically, the role of climate change in all that is like it's going to influence the frequency and magnitude of all these hazards, causing a precedent change to the associated risk. Next, something that is, our acute hazards. And I've heard some of you have been, doing the work on the tsunami evacuation routes here at Hatfield. It's like earthquake and tsunami. So I don't know if you all know, and I guess most of people know on the call knows, but Oregon is located on top of a seismically active tectonic plate called the Cascadia Subductor Zone. It's 1,000 kilometers or 620 miles long megathrust. So that stretches, from here, Cape Mendocino in California, all the way to Vancouver Island in British Columbia. And so these areas are like hook zones. So I don't know if you're familiar, I'm sure you're going to remember your classes, on plate tectonics, back then, but that is a little refresher. But basically, those areas, the thrust faults are going to act like ramps, and the rock above the fault is going to be pushed up and over the rock below. And at some point, it's going basically to rupture. And what it will cause, it will, the two sides will suddenly slip in a process called fault rupture. And the larger the rupture area, like we see the Cascadia subduction zone is really big, the larger the earthquake. And it takes a very long fault rupturing to be a large magnitude earthquake. And what will happen is like the uplifting crust shift the entire water column, possibly generating a massive wave, also called tsunami. And because also the shoreline also gone down, the wave would be able to go further inland and be more destructive. And there are really fast moving waves. And here we expect, they can happen. They arrive here as little as 15 minutes. We said, between 15 to 20 minutes. It depends basically where you are on the coast. I think Gold Beach is the area where it's going to be, hit first by the waves and so forth. They're not like beach waves. So they're basically kind of like a wall of water they should push through. And also, it won't be only one wave. It's going to be multiple waves. So it's going to affect the coast for many hours. And the first wave that to arrive is not only always the biggest one. And here's like an example of, tsunami, like you probably all seen on the news. back then or read about it or seen photos. So here's like another photo of like the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami of 2011. And basically, it would be something similar here, the Cascade subduction zone, by having, a major earthquake followed by tsunami waves. And to be, when we say the big one, it's like a 9.01, 9.1 magnitude earthquake, and it will be instant shaking, they say up to 5 minutes. And also after you have a tsunami wave, and they say, it could be, 30 feet, about 10 meters high. These are approximations, but it would be inundating the whole Oregon coast. And those, the last, big one was basically January 26, 1700. And these occur every 200 to 600 years. So it's really hard to know exactly when the next one will be happening. But so far, we're like, the last one occurred a little over 300 years ago. And I assumed you've been looking at those maps before. If not, it's really easy. Just go online and type tsunami evacuation map. Oregon, Dogami is like the agency that I've been creating them. And that will help you to know, okay, green areas, basically in a nutshell, like you're safe. Orange, yellow is basically how far the water will go for the local tsunami, and orange is like a distant tsunami. What I would say, and that can be a little confusing sometimes, because distance, I would say no matter what, go to the green, because distant tsunami, usually you have, depending where you are, you have a siren or alert on your phone telling you it's coming. If it's like from an earthquake in Alaska, it's about 4 hours. If it's like from an earthquake near Japan, it might be about 10 hours. So you have more time versus, 15 to 20 minutes, maybe maximum 25 minutes, if it's like a local tsunami, local earthquake. And you have also those maps that tell you, how fast you have to go to evacuate. And these are called beat the wave maps. And again, I was showing like, where we are here, Marine Cities building and the Safe Haven Hill. And here we have the vertical evacuation structures. So you actually have 3 in the Pacific Northwest, and I think you're actually the only 3 in the US. The first one was created in Washington. So 2 of them are in Washington state, and we have 1 here in Oregon. And there are actually some studies happening to see where more could be created. But again, these are super expensive. They're like multiple millions, I think. I don't exactly remember the figure for here, but I know it's a lot of money. And here it was created, the construction was done in 2020. So it can provide supplies for over 920 people for up to 2 days. And I know recently there's been a drill. I couldn't attend, but next time. And Tsunami Quest. So I know that Kate Goodwin was with us today, asked me to share, those books, because there are multiple quests in that book, but 7 of them are specific on, you walk along tsunami evacuation routes. And they are like basically clue-directed hunts, self-guided adventures to learn about basic earthquake and tsunamis. And the last edition of the book has just been released. And also here, I know in the room, we have some of the quests available. And online, I would say just type, Tsunami Quest or even Sea Grant, and you will go to the website right away. And now I'm going to quickly present some of the projects I've been involved in. So while I was doing my fellowship, I helped creating this like story map. So the idea was like in Washington state, there's something similar with case studies of different projects happening all along the coast to be prepared for both chronic and acute hazards. And here there are some interested in doing something similar. So it's like basically an iterative project. I'm always trying to add new case studies, but so far we have 39 of them. And they go from like alternative to typical erosion control measures and approaches to acute and chronal hazards such as you can see the little icons. We have coastal erosion case studies, tsunamis, flooding, landslide, coastal hazards, photo gallery, a map when you can see all the different case studies, and they all have the same format. So basically who is involved, what they do, where they got the funding, who are the different partners, who to contact if you want to have more information. And here briefly, I'm going to show, like, for example, if you say like coastal erosion is what it will bring you to. After, there is every time for each coastal hazard, some information about what is this coastal hazard, a little introduction, where you can find more information about that. So different kind of resources. And I try to put the information from like different state agency websites. And here, for example, is like the map you're gonna have. Here's like coastal erosion case studies, and you select which one you want to look at. And for example, this one was the Columbia River South Jetty Dynamic Revetment Project. And again, it tells you where it is, which hazard has been addressed, adaptation strategies, lessons learned, funding, partners, and so forth. Then another project I've been involved in as like senior personnel is like the Die for All project with like specifically a coastal hazard virtual reality map. And it's basically developing a virtually augmented reality toolkit and experiences focused on earthquake and tsunami hazards and preparedness. The funding comes from National Sea Grant, and we have some people, some of the PIs in the room, like Tracy Cruz, and a lot of people involved in that. So what was really nice about this project, and it started in basically really in January by involving some teams, and it's still, in the works right now. But basically, the youth were creators in this project. We got 13 high schoolers, some from the coast, most of them from like the Portland metro area, but they had an 11-week training course. So at first, it was having teaching and leadership skills because they were the ones who were going to basically help develop some of the activities for the app. My role was more like what was like in green there, like lessons on earthquake and tsunamis. So I tried to develop some like presentations about what earthquake and tsunamis are, talk about community preparedness and individual preparedness as well, and give them some key facts and ideas of like what activities, what videos, what photos do you need to illustrate those facts for the app. And also they did a little retreat in Newport for a couple of days to collect, videos and photos. For example, also they went to the Wave Lab first in Covadis on the OSU campus, where they did a little experiment, I think with little like piece of wood and a ping pong ball and create vertical evacuation structures and see which one will survive. I think none of them made it, but it was a fun experiment. And here with someone from DOGAMI, so the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. So field geologist came with us and we went to a marsh here outside Newport and to find some tsunami sand. So they've been doing some coring, and you cannot see that well on the photo, but I swear we found some tsunami sand. You can really see the color was different. And then Tracy Cruz gave us a tour of the different caches. So we were here, at Hatfield. So we've been able to see what was in a cache, what you have in a cache. And after we went to Safe Haven, where the format was a little different. It's like 2 containers. And again, you see what is there. And you can see the students taking photos, videos. So next steps is like the footage collection and sifting. We also partnering with this company called Time Looper to create the virtual reality app. The students or us are not the one doing the coding and creating the app, but just to help provide the content. And then the teams will go around the community and showcase the app. And also there'll be some curriculum development on the side. For example, in the classroom, you want to teach about earthquake and tsunami, you can use your phone or the little fun little headset and have a curriculum and do activities in the classroom. And there is also something similar existing already. So if you go to OSU DAF4Ag website, you can find something similar. And I'm also involved in the Cascadia coastlines and People's Hazards Research Hub. So basically, I'm the coastal committee lead for that project, which is a pretty big project. It's like a National Science Foundation funded project for 5 years. It started in 2021, it will end in 2026. 3 states are involved. So California, Oregon, and Washington. California is more like the north coast of California with Humboldt State Universities and some tribes. In Oregon, it's mostly Oregon State University and University of Oregon. And Washington, it's University of Washington. And also we have 80+ researchers across 5 teams. Some are like really specific, specialized on more like chronic hazards, other acute hazards, more like adaptive capacity, community capacity, and so forth. And also we try to involve undergraduate students as well in the projects. It's called a charter fellowship. And also what this NSF project does is like every year they provide funding for like up to 5 pilot projects. And I was involved in one of them, being the lead PI for one of them. It's called Advancing Inclusive Community-Driven Hazards Training, which consists in the co-production of culturally relevant earthquake, tsunami preparedness resources with Spanish-speaking and Latinx communities to improve the engagement and preparedness. And that was focused mostly in Clatsop County, because like a pilot project, we wanted to start small. And we worked really closely with like a community-based organization called Consejo Hispano, because they are the one who like know very well the community and help us find people and organize events over there, and also let us know what their needs were. So what we did first was like to look at what was there in terms of resources for earthquake and tsunamis. And we looked specifically at what was available for like the Pacific Northwest across multiple agencies. So we found like 70 resources across federal, state, and local agencies. We reviewed both the English and Spanish version, and we had specific review criteria, such as the layout, the language complexity, and cultural relevance. Because cultural relevance and the definition we chose for that was like clear, simple message explained in multiple ways and with examples for a variety of situations, meaning, you know, different language, specific economic situation, housing situation, you know, apartment versus house, or physical abilities, and so forth. So we looked into that, but after what we did was also like to do a lot of community engagement. So we went last October to the Hispanic and Latinx Heritage Celebration event organized by Consejo Hispano in October. And we had a little like display table over there, and we did a survey as well. So the survey was basically, are you aware of tsunami and earthquake? If you are, like, I mean, how are you prepared? And if you want to receive information, where would you like to receive the information, and what format, and what kind of information? What we did, we also conducted focus groups. One was in the seaside, one was in Astoria. And again, we invited the community to share with us, for example, if there is any kind of like emergency, let's say not a tsunami or earthquake, where would you go to have, you know, help in the community? Let's say your child is sick or something like that. And then we move to another exercise. It's like, what if it's like earthquake and tsunami? Where do you go? So most often people say they will go to a community-based organization, to their churches, and also, and the friends and family. So these are like the primary ones. And also we ask them, what kind of information do you want and in what format? And we show them some little videos. And what they said, they really want to have more power in having like community and neighborhood organizations, resources and trainings in Spanish, information more about evacuation routes and trainings, and having trainings offered at the workplace. So based on all the information we collected from the survey and the focus groups, what we decided to do was to do a training. So we recently did a training at the end of June, again with Consejo Hispano helping setting that up. And also I wanted to say that every time we did focus groups or trainings, we offered food. So we had dinner, we offered childcare, and people were compensated for their time as well with gift cards. And so what we did for this training was basically a 3-part training. We wanted to invite basically experts from the community, like for example, the Clatsop Emergency Management Office to give a little talk, or someone from Moistry Extension to explain what do you do in case of wildfire, because evacuation for earthquake tsunami is really different from evacuation for wildfire. So we wanted to explain that. And then we did a presentation, a little training about go bag. So Consejo Hispano was able to have funding to have go bags. So each participant had a free go bag. And what we did, we said, just empty your go bag on the table, and we're going to look at what you have and what do you use it for, and what else you could add to your go bag. Things that are like, you know, not too expensive, or things you can find at home that you could add there. So it's what we did. And after the second part was more like an exercise about map literacy. So when you look at those maps, they can be a little confusing for someone who's like never been able to, not familiar reading maps. So basically we spread out the maps on the table. And what we did is like first, okay, we had little slides saying like, this is where we are today in this like community centers. Find it on the map and put a little sticker. Okay, is it in the tsunami zone or not? If it is, where do you think you have to go to be safe? Then we're asking them, where do you work? Put a little sticky on where you work. And again, look at how far are you from safety, and also the home. And the last one, I think, was schools or other places that they go regularly, like churches. So we asked them to look at all that and to keep the map, to do an exercise of like, to know especially where they are and where they can go for safety. And what we did last, the following day, it was a packed 2 days, but we wanted to do little videos because the community said we want to have also not only like trainings, also like brochures, but also little videos. And we realized that often when you watch a video or when you listen to someone, the message goes more easily if it's someone you know and you trust. So that's why we're thinking, why don't we ask community members who've been involved in focus groups and the training to be on the videos and telling us, what should I put in my go bag? Or what do I do, you know, on the evacuation routes? So we did 2 videos, one on go bag that was done at OSG Extension Office in Astoria, and one on tsunami evacuation route in Seaside. And it started there at kind of like the roundabout in Seaside on the bayfront, and they had to go to safety. And they're all in Spanish. They're going to be in Spanish, and they're going to be presented at the next Hispanic Latinx event in October, kind of like a little video premiere. And we're going to invite everyone to look at the video. And after we do also a workshop, asking people, what do you think? Was it useful? Also related to the training, was it effective? Have you been talking to others about this training? And we see where we go from there, because there's a pilot project that ends at the end of August, and we may ask, you know, like a little extension. And so, yeah, like I just mentioned, the different steps are like presenting the videos, a community workshop. Also, we want to share with the different emergency management offices what we found related to the resources we found online and how we've been using different criteria to say we think these are like more digestible in their format or like convey a simpler message. And yeah, we tried also to write a white paper and peer reviewed paper about all this and continue the discussion with the local communities. But yeah, and basically the main message was like, when you create resources, it's like, you know, there are different needs for different audiences. So how do you adapt existing materials? Because you do want to reinvent the wheel. So every time it's like, make sure to see what is there. And after, try to co-produce materials as well with the local communities. And so you can assess, you know, really the local needs and also assess the different partnerships that are needed for the creation of those materials. And briefly, some other projects that we're going to start working on this summer. This one is still different. It's called Continuing to Scale and Apply Hybrid Approaches for Compound Flood Risk Assessments, directly incorporating climate model output into US West Coast resilient projects. That's a long title, but basically in a nutshell, we're going to focus on like specific estuaries in Lincoln County and then counties, and looking at models that look for compound flooding from, let's say, king tides, storm surge, river flooding, and see by having those models how they can help local communities in making, you know, some planning decisions. And we're going to work closely with DLCD, so the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and they have a project going on called ARAP, called Estuarine Resilience Action Planning, and we're going to work closely with them because they're identifying projects related to flooding, coastal flooding on the coast, and us will see if we can also provide models that can help this prioritizing those projects. Let's say, you know, they're more or less vulnerable, they're more or less feasible, depending on their location. So it's going to help inform the process and hopefully work hand in hand. Another project that has been, you know, working a little on the side for a while, but it's like coastal hazard vulnerability and assessment for the restaurant and lodging industry on the Oregon coast. It's been basically on pause, but hopefully it will start again soon. Why? Because we have a lot of visitors on the coast. For example, in 2018, the north coast of Oregon had about 6.5 million overnight visitors. So that's a lot of people. And it's not only visitors from out of state, it's a lot of people usually coming from the valley to the coast. So how do you have like the hospitality industry being better prepared or train their staff or share information? And also not only for like tsunami and earthquake, but also like for them to be better prepared for like coastal erosion and flooding. And that will conclude my presentation. And I always like to end on this quote from Stephen King, saying there's no harm in hoping for the best as long as you're prepared for the worst. So it's what
Is that the author, Stephen King?
yeah, it's the author Stephen King. Yeah. I know. But yeah, thank you all for your time. And if you have any questions, I guess yeah, I can open the chat. I mean the window so I can see the chat. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Does anyone have any questions in the room or online? I had a quick question. So thanks for the presentation. And so the coastal hazards focus clearly seems to be so how do I bring this up? So we just recently had an event here in Nye Beach where we had actually sewage, water sewage, which is a constant issue, or not a constant, but an issue that comes up repeatedly in Nye Beach, where the treatment plant or whatnot, that beach gets closed, or not closed, but there's signs that says the water's contaminated. What kind of work do you do around cities and coastal towns around that? Because typically I will go and I'll see signs like that, and still people from out of town will come and their kids will still play in that water. No, it's true. And so far from my work, I know it's true, there is a lot of coastal hazards. Let's say you have human-induced hazards, biological hazards, but me, I look more like natural physical hazards. So I would say like water pollution in that case is not part of my work. I'm aware of it. And it's funny because my husband is actually working for DEQ, and he's like a water quality permit writer. So I know about some of those water quality issues, and he's going to be upset that I said that out loud. But it's that I'm aware of all that, but it's not part of the work I'm doing. But maybe like a new hire with Oregon Sea Grant is something that they would be looking into, because we're going to hire soon it's like a water resource specialist, yeah, for the coast. So yeah. Any questions? No, I don't think so. Yeah, and don't hesitate reaching out to me if you have any questions. Yeah.
Thanks, Felicia.
Yeah.
Thank you. And if you want to go on a quest, you can pick one.
I guess I just stop sharing. I let you close the thing.
And might take the microphone off.